Welcome to Shahnameh, Book of Kings. Today we continue with the Reign of Khosrow Parvis. Meanwhile, Feroxid acted as court chamberlain and admitted no one to the king's presence so that he would not hear of what was going on. When the tent of the sun was tattered and noblemen went to their sleeping quarters, Feroxid summoned the city's sentries and all those who had authority over them. Confidently they came to the king's court, where Feroxid said to them, "The cry of the watchman must be different tonight from last night. At each watch of the night goes by, all the watchmen must cry out in the name of Kobad." They agreed. "We will do this, and drive the name of Parvis from our minds." When the night's black tent was pitched, the watchmen's cries went up from the city and bazaar, and all of them called out in the name of Kobad. The king was sleeping in the darkness of the night, and Shirin was next to him in his bed. When she heard the cries, she was troubled, and her heart beat faster. She said, "Your Majesty, what can be happening? Listen, we must talk." The king woke at the sound of her voice and said in his irritation, "Your face is as lovely as the moon, but why are you talking when I'm asleep?" Shirin replied, "Open your ears. Listen to what the watchmen are crying." Khosrow heard their voices, and his face grew pale as fenugreek. He said, 3 watches of the night have gone by, and now you will learn the truth of the astrologer's words. When this brat was born, I secretly named him Kobad. Publicly, his name is Shirui. But in private, Kobad, under cover of the night's darkness, we must make for China, or Machin, or Makran. We must flee secretly and ask for soldiers from the Chinese emperor. But his star was waning, and this talk of flight was empty chatter. Tricks did not help him in the night's darkness. He had underestimated the seriousness of what was afoot. He said to Shirin, "My time has come, and those who hate us have triumphed over our plans." She replied, "May you thrive forever, safe from your enemies' hands. Think of some ruse in your wisdom. God forbid that your enemies prevail. As soon as the dawn breaks, they are sure to come to the palace." Then the king asked for armor, 2 Indian swords, a Byzantine helmet, a quiver full of arrows, and a golden shield from his treasury, as well as a slave who would fight in his defense. In the darkness he made his way to his garden, just at the time when the crow wakes from the sleep. Among the trees there was no space for a couch. He hung his golden shield from a branch in an area where few men came. He sat among the narcissus and the crocuses with an Indian sword placed firmly beneath his knee. As the sun lifted its glittering glance, the king's malevolent enemies made their way to the palace. They went from room to room, but found no sign of the king. They looted his treasuries and gave no thought to his suffering. Khosrow stayed in the garden in the shade of all the tall trees, and by midday he had grown hungry. There was an under-gardener working there who had never seen the king's face. The sun-like sovereign said to him, "Cut a jeweled link from my belt. There are 5 gold bosses on each link. Take the link to the bazaar. Buy me some meat and some bread with it, and see that you go by unfrequented roads." Now, for a man who knew about such things, the jewels on the link were worth 30,000 gold coins. The gardener hurried off to a baker's shop and tried to buy bread with the gold link. The baker said, "I don't know what this is worth, but I'm not letting you go." The 2 went together to a jeweler and asked him to put a value on the link. When this knowledgeable man saw the piece, he said, "But who would dare to buy this? This is a piece from Khosrow's treasury. Each year 100 new ones of this kind are made. Who did you steal this from? Did you snatch it from a slave while he was asleep?" The 3 of them took the gold and jewels to Feroxid, who immediately took the link severed from a golden belt to Prince Shirui and showed it to him. Shirui addressed the gardener, "If you don't tell me where the owner of this is, I'll cut your head off, and the heads of all your family too." He replied, "Your Majesty, he's in the garden, dressed in armor with a bow in his hand. His stature is like a cypress tree, and his face is like the spring. He seems a prince in every way. All the garden shines in his splendor, and his armor, he's like the shining sun. His golden shield hangs from a branch, and a slave stands in front of him, bow in hand. He cut the slink and gave it to me. He said, 'Run, bring me bread and food from the bazaar.' I ran here from his side just a moment ago." Shirui knew that this was Khosrow, whose appearance was unique. 3,000 horsemen went like the wind from the palace to the stream's bank. When Khosrow saw them in the distance, he quailed, but drew his sword for combat. The soldiers saw the king's face, and they turned back, weeping. One by one they went back to Feroxid, and each told the same story, saying, "We are slaves, and he is Khosrow. Misfortune is a new thing in this king's life. No one would oppose him, not so much as by a gold sigh, whether in a garden or the field of battle." Feroxid took a number of guards from the palace and went to the king. He went forward alone and said to Khosrow, "If the king will grant me audience and forgive me for what has happened, I will come and explain the situation. If not, I shall go back to the palace." Khosrow said, "Say what you have to say. You are neither my comforter nor my enemy." Feroxid said, "Look more wisely on what's happening. You could kill 1,000 warriors, but finally you'll tire of combat. All the land of Persia is against you. All men are united in their enmity for you. Come and see what the heavens will show. It may be that their longing for revenge will turn to clemency." Khosrow replied, "You are right. This has always been my fear, that unworthy men should come and lord over me and make me but the butt of their ridicule." Listening to Feroxid's words, the king had grown sick at heart, and he remembered that in earlier times an astrologer said to him, "Your death will occur between 2 mountains and at the hand of a slave, far from other men. One mountain will be of silver and another of gold, and you will sit between the two with your heart trembling in fear. The heavens will be gold above you, and the earth will be of iron, and fortune will be against you." And now Khosrow thought, "This iron armor is like the earth for me. My shield is the gold heavens, and the treasures that have been piled in these gardens, which so delighted my heart, are the 2 mountains. My days have come to an end. Where now is my star that lit the world with splendor, and my power and happiness that made my name more exalted than crowns?" They brought an elephant before him. His soul was darkened by grief as he sat in the saddle and was escorted from the garden. He called out in Parlavi from the elephant's back, "My treasure, even if you are Khosrow's enemy, do not make common cause with those who are against me. Today I am in the clasp of Ahriman, and you were no help to me in distress. Stay hidden and show your face to no one." Then Kobad ordered his men to treat him well, to have him taken to Ctesiphon and installed in his vizier's palace, where Galanush would watch over him with 1,000 cavalry. When the turning heavens brought his reign to an end, Khosrow Parvis had ruled for 38 years. This happened to be the month of Arzah, on the day of day, at the time when fires are lit, fowls roasted, and wine drunk. Then Kobad came forward and placed the crown on his head, and sat in peace and prosperity on the throne. From all of Persia the army paid him homage, and he gave them a year's pay from the king's treasury. He reigned for no more than 7 months. You can call him a king if you wish, or something worthless. But this is the treacherous world's way, and you should not look on it with trusting eyes. When Barbad heard that the king had been unjustly forced to quit the throne, and that he was now powerless, he traveled from Jerome to Ctesiphon, his eyelashes wet with tears, his heart swollen with grief. He came to the palace and saw the former king, whose once ruddy face was now as pale as fenugreek. He stayed with him for a while, and then went weeping to the audience chamber. He mourned in Pahlavi, his cheeks sallow with grief, and his heart filled with pain. When the king and those who were there in the palace, including the guards, heard his lament, they all wept, consumed with the fire of their pity. This is what Barbad sang. "O great Khosrow, great in your majesty, in warlike pride, in magnanimity, where is the greatness now, your high renown, your glory and your throne and royal crown? Where's your chivalry, your power, my king, who sheltered all the world beneath your wing? Where are your wives, now your musicians, all the nobles who have once thronged your audience hall? Where now is Kave's banner and the lords who flourished in the air their glittering swords? Where are your valiant warriors and your priests? Where are your hunting parties and your feasts? Where is that warlike men, and where are those great armies that destroyed our country's foes? Where's your armor, wondrous to behold, studded with jewels fashioned from shining gold? Where is Shabdiz, your fiery stallion, who galloped with such impatience unto you? Where are your glorious gold-shod cavalry, whose swords sought out one sheath of the enemy? Where's that generous, never-failing store of your largesse, your eagerness in war? Where are the camels, horses, elephants, their hodas, trappings, and magnificence? Where's that wise nobility of mind, that eloquence at once adroit and kind? Why are you left deprived in this sad state? Who read you this page from the book of fate? Once you desired a son to be your friend, a prop to your old age, and in the end, grief came to you from him. A king's son gives his father strength and shelter while he lives, but to the King of Kings his son brought pain, and his success destroyed his father's reign. Count Persia as a ruin, and as the lair of lions and lepers, look now in despair. You were the best of Sassan's line. No one will ever reign again as you have done. And as your seed degenerates this land, degenerates beneath an alien hand, it is the shepherd's fault when wolves descend and ravage all the sheep he should defend. God keep your soul, and may each enemy of yours die gibbeted in agony. I swear by God above my noble king, by Maragon, by New Year and the spring, that if my hand plays any song again, it should be stricken from the roll of men. I'll burn my instruments and never face the enemy who's dealt you this disgrace. Then he cut off his 4 fingers and went back to his house with his hand mutilated. There he built a fire and burned all his musical instruments. All those who had allied themselves with the prince trembled day and night at what fate would bring them, since Shirui was a coward and untried in the world's ways. The throne was like a snare to him, and his astrologers knew that his greatness would not last. Those who had been so eager to bring about this evil went to Kobad and talked of what had happened. They said, "We have said this once, and now we repeat it. Your mind is set on other things than sovereignty. If 2 kings are enthroned in one land, one must take precedence, and the other be his inferior, and their subjects will rue the day that the father and son rule together. We are opposed to this arrangement. Do not mention it to us again." Shirui was a slave in their hands, and he was afraid of what would come of this. He answered, "Only a contemptible fool would put his head deliberately into a trap. You must go to your homes and debate what is to be done. Search out someone in this world who can secretly deliver me from this difficulty." The king's enemies looked for someone who could secretly do away with him, but no one had the courage to attempt such a feat, or to bear the mountain of guilt that would come from killing such a monarch. They searched everywhere, till they found a man traveling by the road who had blue eyes and sallow cheeks. His body was covered in hair, and his face was flushed purple. The evil man's feet were dusty. His belly was wasted with hunger, and his body was naked. No one in the world, rich or poor, knew his name. This ugly, wretched, and may he never see that joys of paradise, made his way to Feroxid and said, "I'm the man for the business. Fill my belly, and he's my prey." Feroxid said, "Go and do it, if you can. Speak not a word of this to anyone. I'll have a purse of gold waiting for you, and treat you as if you're one of my own." Then he gave him a sharp, glittering dagger, and the man immediately set off on his errand. He found the king and was feet shackled in the audience hall. Khosrow trembled when he saw his assailant, and tears fell from his eyes. He said, "What ugly name is yours? Even your mother should weep to set eyes on you." The man replied, "They call me Mer Hormaz. I'm a stranger in this land and have no friends or companions here." Khosrow said, And so now my end has come at the hands of a low-born criminal. His face is inhuman, and no one in the world would expect kindness from such a man. The king said to a servant boy standing near to him, "Go, lad, and fetch me a bowl of water mixed with musk and aloes, and bring me a fine set of fresh clothes." The boys heard him, but didn't know what this signified. He quickly brought the king a golden bowl, a ewer, and fresh clothes. Khosrow took the sacred barsom in his hands, and prayed this was no time for idle chat or frivolity. He dressed himself in the clean clothes and asked pardon for his sins. Then he drew a previously unworn cloak over his head so that he would not see his murderer. Dagger in hand, Mer Hormozd locked the doors to the king's apartments. Quickly he went forward and slashed the king's clothes, plunging the blade into his vitals. So turns the world, keeping its hidden secrets, and both the prudent, harmless man and the idle boaster find nothing there but vanity. Whether you own treasures or live in pain and sorrow, you cannot remain in this fleeting world. Choose righteousness and benevolence if you were to be remembered with praise. When news spread in the roads and bazaars that Khosrow had perished in this way, evil doers made their way to where his 15 sons were kept chained in the palace, and murdered these innocents on the same day. Shirui did not dare say anything, but grieved over these events in secret. This then was the end of Khosrow, who had been the lord of such enemies' armies and ruled with such splendor. He had no rival as the King of Kings, and no one had ever heard of such a monarch from former times. I have finished the tale of Khosrow Parvis, and now I will begin that of Shirui and Shirin. 53 days after the king was killed, Shirui sent someone to Shirin with this message: "You are an abomination, a magician who knows all spells. There is no one in Iran more culpable than you. It was your sorcery which could bring the moon down from the heavens that bewitched the king. Tremble now, and come before me. You'll strut so confidently about the palace no longer." Shirin was enraged by his message and its ugly threatening language. She said, "May no man flourish who spills his own father's blood. I shall not see that criminal even from a distance, neither on a day of sorrow nor one of feasting." She summoned a scribe and had a document written in Pahlavi. She dictated her will to this man and enlisted her welfare. She had little poison in a coffer, the like of which could not be found anywhere in the whole country. From then on, she kept it on her person, and the cypress of the meadows proceeded to sew her own shroud. She sent a message back to Shirui: "You wear the crown haughty, your majesty, but the words you've spoken are like the leaves in the wind. May the heart of any malevolent wretch who talks about magic and rejoices in such things be brought low. If the king had cared for such sorceries, he'd have kept a witch in his harem so that he could see her face to face, but he kept me there to delight his heart. When he looked on me as evening fell, he would call me from my apartments, and his soul rejoiced to see me. Shame on you for this talk. Such lies don't suit a sovereign. Remember God, who is benevolent, and don't say such things before men again." They took her message to Shirui, who flared up in anger at his innocent woman and said, "You've no choice but to come. No one in the world is as impudent in her speech as you are." When she heard this, Shirin was troubled, and her cheeks turned sallow. She replied, "I will only come to you in the company of others. You must be surrounded by wise and respectable men." Shirui summoned 50 old men, wise in the world's ways, and then sent a message to Shirin, who said, "Rise, come now and leave off your excuses." Shirin heard, and dressed herself in blue and black, and came before the king. She went straight to the gardens called Shadagan, where there was a place set aside for free men to speak, and she sat there veiled as one customary for the nobly born woman. Shirui sent someone to her with this message: "It is now 2 months since Khosrow died. Be my wife now, as is worthy of you, and in this way you will not be shamed before your inferiors. I shall treat you as my father did, and even more respectfully and kindly than he did." Shirin replied, First act justly towards me, and then my soul will be yours. Then I will not bridle at your questions, or resist your orders or the wishes of your splendid heart." Shirui agreed to this, and told her to say what she had in mind. The noble woman spoke from behind her veil. "May you be prosperous and victorious, your majesty. You said that I am an evil woman and a sorceress, and that there is no purity or righteousness in me." Shirui replied, "This is true, but such an outburst is not to be taken seriously." Then Shirin said to the nobility gathered in the garden of the Shagdan, "What evil have you seen from me? What darkness of soul, or deceit, or foolishness? For many years I was the queen of Persia, and in this time I always supported her brave warriors. I said only righteousness, and all trickery and deceit were far from my mind. Through my intercession many men gained land and a fair portion of the world's goods. Let those who have lived protected by my shadow and that my crown and glory say what they saw and heard, and their words will confirm all I did." The nobles were there, affirmed Shirin's goodness, and said that there was no other woman like her in the world, either in public or hidden away. Shirin said, "My noble lords, who have traveled the world and know its ways, there are 3 things that are honorable in a woman and that adorn the seat of greatness. First, that she possesses both modesty and wealth, so that she may make her husband's house a place of beauty and contentment. Another is that she bear him fine sons, and so augment his splendor. And the third is that she is beautiful of face and of good stature, and that her hair envelop her like a cloak. When I married Khosrow and felt my life to be renewed in the world, he had come from Rome, disheartened and despoiled of his wealth, with hardly a home to call his own in this country. But when his reign became so splendid that no one in the world had ever seen or heard of its like, I bore him 4 sons, Nastud, Sharir, Forid, and Mardashanshah, who rejoined his heart. Jamshid and Feridun did not have such sons, and may my tongue turn mute if I am lying." Having said this, she drew back her veil from her face, which shone like the full moon, and the night behind it was her hair. The third quality is a face such as you see before you, and if anyone believes that I am lying, let him raise his hand. One of my secret attributes was my hair, which no man in the world has ever seen. And here I display it to you all my magic, which is not from sorcery, or tricks, or malevolence. No one has seen my hair before, and none of the nobles have even heard tell of it." The elders were dumbfounded at the sight of her, and they moistened their lips. When Shirui saw Shirin's face, his soul seemed to take leave of his body. He said to her, "I must have no one but you. You are the only wife in all Iran whom I desire." The beautiful woman answered him, "There are matters I still require from the Persia's king. May your reign be long, but I have some requests if you will grant them." Shirui replied, "My soul is yours. I will grant you whatever you wish." Shirin said, "Give me, piece by piece, before this company of nobles, all the wealth that I have owned in this land, and sign this document, witnessing that you have no claim to it." Immediately Shirui did as she requested, and when her requests were fulfilled, Shirin went from the garden of Shagadan, walking before the nobles gathered there, to her own home, where she used her wealth to free her slaves and rejoice their hearts. The rest of her possessions she gave to the poor, bestowing most of the people of her own household. She gave a portion to the fire temples for the celebration of the New Year and summer festivals. There was a convent which was in ruins and had become a lair of lions, and this she rebuilt, dedicating to the memory of Khosrow for the good of his soul. Then she sat in a garden unveiled on the ground, divested of her finery. She called her servants to her and sat each one down with kindness. She said in a loud voice, "All of you who have had generous hearts, hear what I have to say, since no one will see my face again. Say only the truth. Wise people do not lie. From the time that I joined Khosrow and was introduced into the golden apartments of his harem, from when I became the first of queens in the glory of the king, what sins did I commit? Don't speak merely for form's sake. What do such things matter to a desperate woman? Everyone stood and said, "Queen among kings, you are an eloquent, wise, and enlightened in your soul. We swear by God that no one has ever seen a woman like you before, or heard such a voice from behind the veil. From the time of Hashang until now, no one like you has ever sat on the throne. All her servants and slaves said together, 'You are praised in China and the West and in Taurus. Who would dare to speak ill of you? And how could you ever commit an evil act?' Shirin responded to them, 'This criminal whom the turning heavens mock killed his own father for the sake of a crown and throne. For his may he never know happiness or good fortune again. Does he think he can evade death, having killed his father in such a wretched fashion? He has sent me a message that has darkened me, anguished, and I have told him that while I remain alive, I shall devote myself to God. I have told him my intentions, but his evil desires have filled me with sorrow, and I fear that after I die, he will publicly slander me.' The company wept, both at her words and for Khosrow Parvis. The king was told of what this innocent woman had said, and he asked her again what she desired. Shirin sent a messenger to him, saying that she had only one more wish, that the entrance to Khosrow's tomb be opened for her, and that she be allowed to look at him once more. Shirui responded that it was fitting for her to look on the king again. The guards opened the tomb, and Shirin began a mourning lament. She laid her face against Khosrow's face, and spoke to him the words they had spoken to one another in times past. Then she drank the mortal poison she carried, which began to cloud her soul. Her clothes seemed scented with camphor. She sat beside the king and leaned her back against the tomb walls. So she died, and her death was praised by the world. When Shirui heard of this, he fell sick, and the sight of Shirin's body filled him with grief. He ordered that another tomb be constructed, and there she was laid, her head crowned with musk and camphor. Then Shirui sealed Khosrow's tomb, and not many days passed before he, too, was given poison. The world had its fill of kings. He was born shamefully and died shamefully, leaving the throne to his son. So a man may reign for 7 months, and in the 8th he finds that his crown is made of the camphor with which the dead are anointed. Shirui was seated on the throne by his son Ardashir, who ruled for 6 months, and then was murdered. Goraz seized the throne, but he too was murdered after the reign of less than 2 months. 2 royal princesses, Purin Dokht and Azram Dokht, reigned briefly, the first for 6 months, the second for 4 months. They were succeeded by Feroxid, who was poisoned after a month. A grandson of Khosrow Parvis, Yazdegerd III, then became the last Sassanian king of Iran. And here is where I end my tale for today. But I'll be back tomorrow with more tales, many more tales. Until then, my friends.